Hello, beautiful people. How are we doing today? Welcome back to the RR Show. I'm your host, Jane, and today we are diving headfirst into the weirdly aggressive world of entitled people. Today's stories feature some truly spectacular behavior. We've got people demanding things that make absolutely no sense, strangers inserting themselves where they absolutely do not belong, and a few individuals who really could have benefited from sitting quietly and minding their own business. It's uncomfortable, it's chaotic, and naturally, I cannot wait to share them with you all. But before we get into today's collection of public nonsense, if you've got a story of your own, whether it's awkward, messy, dramatic, or completely absurd, you can send them over to us at mystory@disturbedpodcast.com. I would love to give them a read. Alrighty, let's begin, shall we? Today's first story is from user Masons17, and it's titled, "Entitled Parents Ask Me to Remove My Prosthetic," which, unfortunately, tells you exactly the kind of people we'll be dealing with today. So let's get into it. For a bit of background, I was born partially deaf on my left side because of a birth defect. On top of that, my left ear was also misshapen due to a combination of the defect itself and multiple surgeries I had growing up to try and repair it. So once I got older, I started wearing a prosthetic ear on that side. If you looked closely, it wasn't perfect, but it looked significantly more natural than what I originally had. Most people didn't really notice it unless I specifically told them. The downside, though, is that prosthetics like that don't last forever. Over time, the colour fades, the edges start tearing, and eventually they need to be replaced. Mine was attached using medical adhesive, so it was removable, but not casually. At this time, I was overdue for a replacement. The prosthetic I had was visibly worn down around the edges, and I was just waiting for insurance approval so I could get a new one. Back then, I was working in a pediatric emergency room. One day during a shift, I got asked to perform an EKG on a kid who was probably around 8 or 10 years old. When I walked into the room and began to introduce myself to the family, the mother looked up at me and gasped. Not a subtle reaction, this was a full, shocked gasp, like she had just seen something horrifying. It caught me completely off guard, so I stopped and asked if something was wrong. And she goes, "Your ear is really freaking me out. Is it supposed to be some kind of Halloween costume or something? That seems really inappropriate for a children's hospital." Now, keep in mind, it was only like October 2nd or 3rd, not even close to Halloween yet. For a second, I genuinely didn't know what to say. I was just standing there trying to process the fact that a grown woman had looked at a healthcare worker in a hospital and assumed his physical disability was a costume. So I calmly explained, "No, I have a disability. It's a prosthetic." Instead of apologizing or looking embarrassed, she immediately said, "Can you take it off? It's making me uncomfortable." I politely explained that it was attached with medical adhesive and wasn't something I could just pop off in the middle of work. She clearly wasn't happy about that, but at least she stopped talking about it. So I focused on the patient and started doing the EKG. The kid, ironically, was completely fine. Didn't care at all. Honestly, probably the easiest person in the room to deal with. The father, however, decided that it was an appropriate time to interview me. While I was attaching leads and running the tests, he started asking me questions in a very pointed tone. "So, are you actually qualified to do this? How long did you go to school for this job? How much supervision do you need?" On the surface, maybe those questions sound harmless, but when you're standing there in scrubs in a hospital, actively doing your job, you can tell when someone isn't asking out of curiosity. He wasn't asking because he wanted the information. He was asking because he had already decided that because I looked different, I must also be intellectually disabled or unfit to work in medicine. I answered the father's questions briefly, finished the EKG as quickly as possible, and wrapped everything up. Before leaving, I told the patient I hope they felt better soon, because again, the kid had done absolutely nothing wrong. Then I left the room and immediately gave the bedside nurse the report. And I specifically asked her, please don't send me back into that room unless it is absolutely necessary. At the time, I didn't say anything to the parents beyond the bare minimum. I just wanted to get out of there and move on with my shift. But honestly, looking back, part of me wishes I had stood up for myself more directly, because some people really do not have respect for people with disabilities. But I'm doing great now. Since then, I've moved on to working in the pediatric ICU, gone back to school for my master's degree, and earned several more credentials along the way. So if there's one thing to take from that experience, it's this: never let someone else decide what you're capable of just because of your disability. I have to say, I have massive respect for Mason, 17, for staying professional through all of that, because that is rough. Those parents were just really, really shitty people. Now, our next story is from user refried_ginger, and it's a little less serious, but the entitlement levels are still incredibly high. We're talking about somebody who desperately needs to learn the concept of personal space and patience. The other night, I went out to dinner with my dad after work. I'd had one of those long, draining days where by the time you finally sit down somewhere nice, all you want is good food, a glass of wine, and for nobody to bother you. The restaurant was packed. It had an indoor dining room, plus this back deck area with extra seating and a full bar. We were sitting at the bar section outside, which was first come, first served. No hostess managing tables, no wait list, just people circling around like vultures anytime a seat opened up. By the end of dinner, my dad and I were winding down. We still had some wine left, probably a little more than a quarter of the bottle, and the bartender had just brought over dessert. I hadn't even taken a bite yet when I hear a voice right behind me saying, "We'll take those seats when you guys are done." I turn around and there's this middle-aged guy standing basically on top of us. My dad, being more patient than me, just kind of nodded and said, "No problem," before turning back around. This guy then proceeded to make sure we knew he wanted the chairs because, and I quote, "people like to hover and snatch them," all while he's inches over my shoulder. So I'm thinking, okay, but right now you're the one hovering. My dad sort of laughed politely and reassured him again, like, "Yeah, no problem, we get it." Then he turned back to his wine, clearly trying to end the interaction. But this guy would not leave. He kept standing there talking about how he, his wife, and their friend really wanted somewhere to sit for cocktails. Meanwhile, he's practically leaning over my shoulder while I'm staring at a dessert I haven't even touched yet. At first, I tried to ignore it, but after a minute, it started to genuinely irritate me. I just think it's incredibly rude to interrupt people while they're eating, especially repeatedly, like we're clearly still in the middle of our meal. So finally, I turned around and said, "We just got these desserts, and you can see we're not done with our drinks yet, so I plan to be here for a little while longer, but I'll let you know when we're done." Then I immediately turned back around because I was not interested in making this into some extended conversation. And somehow this guy still did not take the hint. He goes, "Oh, take your time, no rush, we just want the seats." At that point, I was already annoyed enough that I couldn't help myself. So I looked directly at him and said, "I know what you want. Don't worry, we won't rush," with the biggest customer service smile I could manage. Honestly, before all of this happened, I would have been perfectly ready to leave soon. I was tired. I'd been at work all day and we'd already been at dinner for over 2 hours. But this just bothered me. It was so annoying and so audacious telling me not to rush when you're pushing the point that you're waiting for us to leave. So I decided to savor every sip of my wine, not a drop left behind, and no rushing on dessert either. A little while later, another couple walked up on my dad's side. Unlike the guy hovering over me, they seemed like normal human beings. They chatted casually with my dad for a minute or two. No pressure, no looming over us, no weird territorial energy. Eventually, I finished dessert, boxed up my leftovers, and we got ready to leave. Instead of giving the seats to the guy who'd been stalking us for the last 20 minutes, my dad stood up, pushed his chair toward the other couple and said, "Hope you two have a nice dinner." As we were walking away, I could hear the first guy complaining behind us, saying how that chair was his. I genuinely hope he had to stand there holding his cocktail for the rest of the night. I wholeheartedly support the level of pettiness in that story. If someone was hovering over me while I was eating dessert, I would suddenly need an extra 45 minutes and a fresh glass of wine, let me tell you. Now, our next story from user Micah Mellon features a completely different kind of entitled behavior. this time from the wonderful world of university administration. And if you've ever dealt with bureaucracy before, you already know exactly the kind of headache we're about to walk into. But before we dive into all that academic chaos, we're going to take a quick break. Alright, now, if you've ever had somebody in authority making your life unnecessarily difficult simply because they could, this next story is going to hit a nerve. Let's get into it. In every university, at least in my country and probably in most others too, there are mandatory subjects everyone has to take regardless of their major. Doesn't matter if you're studying engineering, law, English, everyone gets shoved into the same required classes eventually. For reference, my friends and I are studying mass communication. About 2 weeks before the semester started, we were registering for classes. For those mandatory subjects, the university lets you choose which faculty section you want to join. The syllabus is identical across every section. The only real difference is the lecturer and the timetable. Now, the mass communication faculty section was on Fridays from 8 to 10 in the morning, which sounded miserable already. But for me, it was especially bad because I work part-time. Mostly weekends, but honestly whenever I can squeeze shifts in. On Fridays after class, I'd have to travel almost 2 hours back home before heading straight to work. It would have been exhausting every single week. However, the management faculty had a Monday evening class from 6 to 8 p.m., which was way more manageable. So we signed up for that one instead. And this wasn't my first rodeo. I'd been in mandatory classes that were in different faculty sections 2 or 3 times over the past 2 years that I've been at this university, with no issues whatsoever. So for the first few weeks of the semester, everything was perfectly normal. Then, in week 4, our lecturer, Mrs. N, suddenly emailed my friends and me saying she had just been informed that we apparently weren't allowed to be in her class anymore, and we had to switch back to our own faculty section immediately. At first, we were confused, and we ended up on a full wild goose chase between 2 different departments. One office told us to go to the other department. That department sent us back to the first one. We spent the better part of the day walking around campus trying to get one clear answer from somebody. When we finally got to speak to an admin officer from the mass communication faculty, she was super rude and condescending. She called us selfish and refused to explain anything properly. She just kept repeating, you can't, you just can't, when we asked her anything. Every time one of us tried to ask a question, she'd interrupt halfway through. She also asked us questions like, why would you choose another faculty's class? But every time I tried to explain, she'd cut me off mid-sentence. I realized she wasn't trying to explain anything. She was just trying to exhaust us, just shut us down over and over until we gave up and left. If she had simply explained politely from the beginning that there had been some policy change or something like that, I honestly probably would have accepted it and moved on. Annoying, sure, but fine. But the way she spoke to us immediately flipped a switch in my brain. So out of pure spite, I stopped wanting to cooperate. Finally, after being interrupted for probably the 10th time, I cut in and said as calmly as I could, "Ma'am, you've asked us several questions without allowing us to answer, and you also haven't answered ours. We're willing to comply, but we'd like to understand why we've suddenly been asked to switch classes in week 4, and whether there's another option since this schedule accommodates us better." Surprisingly, that actually made her stop cutting me off. But when she had regained composure, she just snapped at us. "It messes up the end of semester report. You students should manage your schedules better." That part really annoyed me. Because not every student has the luxury of building their entire life around university timetables. Some of us work, some commute long distances, some are balancing family responsibilities on top of school. So I replied, "I thought university was supposed to accommodate students from different circumstances. I work part-time, for example." The moment I said that, her whole attitude changed. She switched into that fake customer service sweet voice that people use when they're angry but trying to sound professional. "Fine," she said. "Email your lecturer and ask if she agrees to let you stay. If she says no, you come back here, drop the class, and register for your own faculty section. Okay? Okay." The way she said, "Okay, okay," genuinely made me want to launch myself into the sun. But instead, I smiled politely and said, "Okay, thank you." And then we left. So we emailed Mrs. N and CC'd the admin officer exactly like she had asked. Mrs. N replied saying she had absolutely no issue with us remaining in the class, which really should have put an end to the whole thing. But apparently the admin officer had decided she was fully committed to the bit. Because despite literally telling us she would allow it if the lecturer agreed, she suddenly replied with this long email explaining why we still couldn't stay in the class after all. That's when I pulled my final move. I contacted Mrs. Z, the lecturer teaching the Friday morning mass communications class. Now thankfully, Mrs. Z and I are actually pretty close. I've helped her a lot over the previous 2 semesters, ever since meeting her during my first year, and she's always been incredibly supportive of me. So I messaged her personally just to let her know I might end up transferring into her Friday class. She replied, immediately confused because she thought I was staying in the management class section. So I explained the entire situation from beginning to end, and she was horrified. Apparently, the admin officer's explanation about messing up the reports was complete nonsense. Mrs. Zedge told me the university system automatically collects grades across all divisions, regardless of students' majors. It literally changed nothing. The real reason the admin wanted us to move was somehow even pettier. A few students from Mrs. Zed's Friday morning class had apparently wanted to transfer into the Monday evening management section because the Friday slot was too early for them, but they requested it after the 3rd week, which violated university policy, so their requests were denied. And somehow, instead of simply accepting that, the admin decided that my friends and I needed to be kicked out too. Mrs. Z explained that lecturers themselves have to approve any students transferring into their classes. And after hearing what had happened, she said that she would not approve my transfer. No approval, no class switch. And she didn't stop there. She personally contacted the admin herself and told her she did not want additional students added into her already full class. She also pointed out that we were approaching week 5 and nearing the deadline for the first assignment, which made changing sections unnecessarily disruptive. So in the end, we stayed exactly where we were from the beginning. All that drama, all that attitude, all that condescension, just for the admin to lose anyway. Honestly, it was one of the most satisfying victories I've ever had at university. Sucks to suck, admin. There's just something beautiful about somebody going on a completely unnecessary power trip and then immediately getting shut down. Exactly the kind of energy we love to see. Now, our final story today takes us away from university bureaucracy and into another environment that somehow brings out the absolute worst in humanity: a garage sale. If you've ever sold something secondhand, you already know what's coming. Somebody sees an item worth good money, offers an insultingly low amount, and then somehow gets angry when the answer is no. But before we dive into it, we're going to take a quick break. Okay, let's dive right into our final encounter with an entitled person, this time in the wonderfully chaotic world of garage sales. Many years ago, my family and I were moving to another country, so we needed to decide what we'd be packing into the shipping container to take with us. We had pulled a lot of stuff to the side to get rid of because we knew not all of our stuff would fit into the container. We had a double garage at the time, so we parked the cars in the driveway for over a week and started putting the things we weren't going to take with us into the garage to sell. Garage sale weekend comes around and the garage was absolutely packed with stuff. There were a lot of baby things that our 3-year-old no longer needed, including a bouncer, portable cot, stroller, etc. They were all high-end pieces because, like most parents, we were afraid of getting cheap items that might put our baby at risk. We also had other household items like outdoor furniture, tools, bookshelves, crystal sets. You get the picture. We put an ad in the local paper advertising the sale, and at 7 a.m. there were already people waiting outside. The prices were all reasonable because we just wanted to get rid of everything before we left, and for the most part, the garage was emptying nicely. The baby items were all sitting along one wall when CB comes in. She asked me how much they were, and I told her. The bouncer is $10, the portable cot is $40, and the stroller is $20. She immediately snapped at me that was too expensive for old things, and that she'd give me $10 for the lot. I told her firmly, no, these items are all in good condition and the prices are fair. This is when CB slipped up. She said, I own a secondhand store and I'm telling you, you're asking too much. So I replied, oh, now I see. You want my stuff for next to nothing, so you can make money from my things in your store. You can have all 3 things for $50 or you can leave. She then proceeds to pick up the 3 items, telling me $10 is enough and that's all she's giving me. I told her unless she had $50 for those things, she could put them down and get out of my garage. She puts them down and informs me that she'll be back in a couple of hours, and when these items are still here, she'll take them all for $5. I told her once again to get out and not come back. The garage sale was wrapping up in the afternoon, and we'd made a decent amount of money selling our old items. There were a few odds and ends left, which we planned on giving to our friends. The baby items were still there, so I called my friend who had recently become a grandmother and asked if she would like them. She was thrilled as her son and daughter-in-law both worked and she'd be looking after her grandchild during the day. This meant she would have her own set of things for the baby in her house, making life easier for everyone. Just as my friend is loading the items into her car, along comes CB. She goes, "What are you doing? I wanted those things." I told her, too bad, they're no longer for sale. Then she asked, how much did you con this poor person for? So I told her the truth. Free. I'm giving them to her. She responded, you can't do that. I offered you $10 for them. And I told her, actually, I can. They are still mine, and I can smash them into pieces or give them away. CB was not happy. She said, you'd rather give them away than make $10? I wanted them first. You know the rules of selling, first in, first served. So I said, there's also a thing called paying a fair price, and you refused my price. See ya. I waved goodbye to my friend, and as CB started to follow me into the garage to see what else was left, I hit the remote to close the door. In the end, my friend wanted to thank us for giving her those baby items, so once our house was all packed up, she invited us over for dinner a few times so we wouldn't have to eat takeout every night. As far as I was concerned, that was a beautiful trade-off. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today, folks. I'm your host, Jane Rice, and this has been The RR Show, a production of Evergreen Podcasts. Our producer is Declan Roars, and our sound engineer is Sean Rule Hoffman. If you enjoyed the show, we would absolutely love it if you could subscribe and leave us a review on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you have a story that you think we would like, and you think that maybe we could include it on the show, you can send it to us at mystory@disturbedpodcast.com. For more information about the show and for more great podcasts that you could listen to, you can visit evergreenpodcast.com. We will see you next week. Bye.